Prosperity in Black America. What will this require? Is Black business prospering? Are we reaching women and minority-owned businesses? How do we achieve earning parity for wealth for our families? Do our children really have access to education? Will our families have choices for our children? Prison pipelines, mass incarceration, tearing our families apart. A healthcare system not accessible to the masses. The disproportionate termination of Black women from corporate America. When will we actually begin to address what's really at play? How do Black people gain more power to help make these changes? This requires a lot of political will and courage. I'm that provocateur of change. I am Cindi Bright. Welcome to HeartBeat.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to HeartBeat. I am your host, Cindi Bright. Thank you for joining us this evening. The subject for tonight is titled The Path Forward. How do we move forward in a time of so much chaos? And how do we begin to try to even build bridges to move ourselves forward? Now, it's somewhat of a rhetorical question because there really isn't an answer per se to the questions, but the dialogue that we need to have and continue to have is important for all of us. Now, this topic is really important to me. My heart has been hurting a lot as of late. It is very difficult to turn on the news. It is very difficult to engage with people. It is very difficult to try to move any aspect of society forward. In fact, many times I feel like just hiding out in my house and never peeking my head out the door anymore. It's that difficult at times. I want to have this conversation. We have a full house with our HeartBeat commentators this evening. So let me begin welcoming in. First in, we're going to add in Dr. J, who is here with us every week. Good evening, Queen.
Good evening, Queen.
Dr. Stefani Coverson joins us.
Hey.
Erin Jones is joining us this evening, and we are expected to have Michele Dotson on with us too as soon as she's able to join. So let me just first off and say welcome to all of you. How are you all doing this evening?
Great.
Everybody doing good? I don't quite believe all of that. I've been watching y'all's TikToks and so I know we all have a little bit of kind of stuff going on here. Let me start off, Erin. I want to start with you this evening because, I was watching some of your pain this morning on TikTok that you were talking about some of the things that you have been experiencing in the schools and, how are you, personally doing in a time like this? And you're inside of in the education system, watching what's happening to our children at this time as well. Just talk to us about what's happening.
So I think it's funny. I just finished a training just now on how to stay hopeful in hopeless times. And one of the things I talked about is the power of gratitude. So I am very intentional about practicing gratitude because I realize life is so hard and one of the things I tell people is when you practice gratitude every day, it creates a positive neural network and allows you to see hope in devastation. And so I practice gratitude every day, but just real talk. My very first preschool, first Black woman teacher just passed away on Monday. And my husband's best friend from high school is not going to make it through this week. Dying of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot. I mean, it's like the personal, like really close to home stuff. And then and if you know my story, like Israel and Palestine have been part of my story since I was a little girl. So watching this for the 40th year is just really hard to watch. So it's a lot, but I would tell you that I practice gratitude because I know the world is on fire and I need to be able to find hope in times of devastation.
How do we find some hope right now? Dr. Coverson, what's going on with you this past week? Erin, I did see that. And so I do want to, extend a heart to, I saw about your husband's friend too. And so I'm just sending you a warm virtual hug over what you personally are having to deal with right now. Dr. Coverson, what's happening with you this past week outside of your school demands and business demands and all that? How are you doing?
Yeah, I just also want to extend my condolences to Erin, and I'm sending you and your husband like just lots of hugs. I would say this last week has been heavy, and so I think, just kind of retreated somewhat into a place of prayer, a place of trying to remind myself what's going well. Like, just even if it's, I got up this morning, like my coffee was delicious, even if it's just little tiny things. Um, so I've been trying to very much focus on doing that. And I, definitely agree with Erin that when you try to find those moments of gratitude, or trying to look at what's going well for you, um, I think it makes things a little more tolerable. I have intentionally tried to spend some time off of social media, um, and not necessarily for the mental health break, um, but more around what can I be doing in real life, in terms of offering support, advocacy, conversation, um, because having people that you care deeply about, embroiled in conflict or death, health issues, um, just trying to figure out how I can support and uh, love on others. So,
Mm, thank you for that. Dr. J, how you been? How you doing?
How I doing? Well, I'm honored to have the blood running warm through my veins and having a reasonable portion of my health and strength. I understand now why our elders used to start off their testimony service with that in church. Erin, I'm so glad I got a chance to see you the other day, quite by accident, to give you a hug. And it was a divine moment. I would have to say that's what this past week has been like for me. I had a chance to work with an incredible group of people at the Carl Maxey Center in Spokane, Washington, do a workshop last Tuesday, and then ended the week with incredible multicultural leaders with the YUSA, talking about be a leader, leave a legacy. And similar to you, Doc, I too have been in much prayer, contemplation, and shut in. And I was thinking about just what tonight's opportunities are going to be in this conversation on the path forward. I was reminded of lift every voice and sing. Now, for those of you who don't know, Cindi blessed us with these armchair earrings to remind us of Montgomery, where people had to lift every chair and swing. But in our path forward, I'm reminded of uh, stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt of the days when help unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. And and then listening to those three verses and lift every voice and sing, I believe that that's the path forward. So we do not have to continue to lift every chair and swing.
It's I feel in this moment, I mean, part of the reason for this topic is because I feel like we all know, um, maybe the word I'll use is the mechanics of what are some of the things that we can do, our prayer life, our lives of gratitude, and showing uh, that part of our humanity Um, and yet we are we are the women that are kind of in the trenches, and part of what I was wrestling with on this topic is, historically it has not, the bridges have not been built in terms of who are the people that are going to continue to blaze the path of justice, blaze the path of protection, blaze the path of democracy, like the things that we're all standing for. Um, can we continue to do that in these moments? And how do we? I think one of the phrases I lifted out of Bishop Jake's book that I read in the past 3 days, which is, how do we, how are we all, not just Black women, how are we all beacons of light in this world, not just a candle in church on Sunday? Right. So how do we hold on to, even in our holding on to faith, we have moments of silence or what feels like, the absence of the Father while we, are in our spaces also. How do we nurture ourselves forward and recognizing that we are heading into, I mean, I believe after November the 7th, when this election cycle's over, and I'm not necessarily trying to jump into politics, but politics are going to take front and center stage. And so it's going to be all over our social media, all over our TVs. Like, we won't be able to escape what's about to happen. I mean, they just elected, an idiot to the speaker seat today, and I didn't have the TV on, but the news flash came across my phone, and I was just like, you know, what what do we do? Like, how do we preserve our sanity? Because I feel like I'm losing my own sanity. Um, so much so that I just disengage on some levels these days because I just don't even feel like dealing with the fight, if you will. I don't feel like fighting. I don't feel like, right. So, I mean, it's kind of, maybe I'm asking the same question in a different way, but we're going to lose our minds here really soon because we're the folks who are impacted the most. So we have the most to lose by not having a stake in the fight. And yet we can't fight 7 days a week, 365, right? So, and it shows itself up in ways. Let's just talk about the ways in which it's showing itself in our lives, right? How is this fight showing itself in your lives personally? Erin, go ahead.
Can I share too? I want to speak to that
Mhm.
24/7, 7 days a week. I want to say we can't though. And I think the model that I am learning the older I get is that I have to rest and I can't be going, right? And so I think so much of this is about learning. We're all women of faith. And so I trust that God has it all in his hands anyway. And it's not my job to fix it all. So I think I tried that, like fixing it all. And my husband reminds me all the time, Erin, you have 6 feet of influence. Use your 6 feet of influence. That's what you got. That's what God gave you. So stop trying to save the world. What you have is 6 feet of influence. And so I would remind us, number one, that Jesus rested too. But number two, we only have so much influence. And so one of the things that I've been telling people this week is your ballots came out. Vote for school boards. Like, sometimes we worry so much about what's happening at the national level, but right here locally, your school board races, I will tell you, because I'm facilitating the school directors conference. Your school boards matter more than anything else right now. And way too many people are disconnected and they're discouraged. And I'm like, one thing you can do is you can investigate your school directors and you can vote to make sure that we don't have Moms for Liberty and other people that are like the new Speaker of the House in office in our local community. And so one of the things that gives me hope is, yes, I get to, my 6 feet is going to be marking up my ballot. I already know who I'm going to vote for. And so the things that we do have control over, we need to be taking control over. The things we don't have control over, we've got to stop worrying about, pray about, trust that God has it in his hands. But like, I can't, one of the things I've let go from myself is worrying about things that I can't control. I'm going to pray about them. And then I'm going to let it go and take care of. Stefani, I so appreciate about what you said today. Like, what can you do here? And this is what I've been encouraging people all week long is, what are the things that you could do right here for our Indigenous people here, for Black people here, for queer people here? What are the things you can do right in your community so that you know I'm making a difference?
And I just want to jump in to say, because one of the things that I'm noticing a lot is the terror campaign against Black, Indigenous, and people of color has started by the Democratic Party or liberals. And I'm not talking about like the party capital D. I'm talking about people who call themselves members of the Democratic Party and liberals. And so if you don't vote, like you've got to, plug your nose and vote, even though you're seeing things and calling out things that, were promised in prior campaign um, speeches, or what the Israeli and Palestinian uh, uh, occupation and conflict, whatever those things are, and whatever reasons people are saying, particularly folks of color are saying, I'm concerned about voting, or I am not voting for this particular person, or I'm not voting at all. What I am seeing is these attacks. And really what these attacks and sort of the scare tactics and the threats, if you don't vote, then, we're going to go to hell in a handbasket. Right. And so these attacks, to me, smack of entitlement, number one. Like nobody is entitled to somebody's vote, one. And two, it sidesteps these folks' responsibilities. So I had to go back, for example, and remind myself of the percentages of who voted for Joe Biden in the last election. And for example, Black folks were only 19%. And so once you subtracted out all of the folks of color, if I remember my numbers correctly, it was 61% of white folks voting for Joe Biden, which to me means if you don't like what is being said, then the onus is on you to maybe go woo some of your family members over that you don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations with during the holidays, because you don't want to ruin the holidays, and then come for, Black, Indigenous, and folks of color who are like, I'm really uncomfortable with what is happening. This is not what I gave my vote for. And so I say all of this to say that in that rabbit hole that I went down in order to post that TikTok about telling people to stop it, I am rejecting the terror campaign. Because the thing is that Black and brown folks are already oppressed in this country. And so really, the terror alert is this recognition of the canary in the coal mine that is woozy and getting ready to fall off of its perch. And that fear is about fear of oppression happening to them. It's not about let me stand in solidarity and let me be an unconditional ally, co-conspirator, or advocate of change. It's really not. And so one of the things that I'm intentionally doing is not buying into that terror campaign, because again, to Erin's point, I can only change, address, and redress what is in that 6 foot, sphere of influence. So that's one thing that I have just decided that I'm going to do. I'm not falling for those theatrics. And we as Black women do not have to be at the front of the line, doorbelling and writing and doing all of the things we do if we're not liking the results. Like any other individual gets, they get to they get to have their vote earned and we get to be bullied. It feels like we get to be bullied
Mhm.
into turning ours over. And that's what I'm rejecting this cycle.
Mhm.
What do you, so I'm gonna go deeper into that, Stephanie, because a couple things. One, because that what you're describing has a personal impact on us, whether we, you know, acknowledge it externally or not. It's eating at us inside. Like you can't, because we're humans, and so the bullying behavior towards us for our votes and for all the things are driving behaviors within ourselves that are harming ourselves too, right? It's harming our relationships, it's harming our relationship with ourselves because we're so used to being in the fight. And so how I'm using my hands here, like how do we keep it here? It's easy to say it, but it's harder to do it, right? Which is to reject the penetration of the bullying that is creating yeah, I'm just going to speak for myself when I say it, almost a level of bitterness inside around the things that we have to constantly deal with and tolerate. And so that's, I'm just talking, but I mean, it's a hard, I would say that it's easy theoretically to talk about what we know we need to do, but peeling that back to how that's impacting us individually and then what that shows up, how we actually show up, like the group of us, like well, are we role modeling like what we want to be in the world for other women to follow in terms of how we're handling this time? Dr. J, what do you think about my babbling?
Couple things. First, the bullying. How do we show up? How do we push back? Yesterday, I was thinking about something, which is it really is our responsibility to teach people how to treat us.
Hmm.
It's our responsibility to teach people how to treat us, and in therefore response to what Doc was saying, I'd be like, well, yes, no means no. If you want my vote, earn it. And we get to say that, those who believe it. This is my birth month. I've spent most of this month in Rochester, New York, dealing with my dad's estate. I realized that I never had a chance to grieve the loss of my dad. And when I thought about, now mind you, he had every yard sign there, Hillary for Senate, Obama, Biden, and every local race that took place in Rochester, New York. Clearly Dad was involved. But when you ask the question, how is this showing up? What I was watching, though, from the front porch of Dad's house while taking a break and cleaning it out, is how the neighborhood that was predominantly Black, well, it was all Black, homeowners when I was growing up, it is now going through an urban removal process where there are people who are buying those homes and making them rentals, and they don't look like us, as a matter of fact, because the investors are able to come in. The little girl who stopped by to say that how much she appreciated Dad and how much was I still in the house for, she was unable to buy a home for her babies because investors who did not look like us were coming in, buying the property in our neighborhood, and then flipping it for rentals. So people like in our generation who have generational wealth, their generation is being locked out. And the more I thought about it, and as I was watching this and thinking about it, as I was driving around the neighborhood, I was getting upset. And I said, no, I'm not going to get upset about this because it's not like I'm going to stop this except in the sale of this particular house. But what I was reminded of this month to get rid of the bitterness that you were mentioning, Cindi, is to learn to receive. and to receive without apology, and receive all the help that anybody wants to give, to learn to rest, and to celebrate yourself. Those were the life lessons that I've had a chance to experience this month while going through that very exhausting psychologically, emotionally, and physically experience, but yet rewarding because I was reminded of my why, my who, my foundation, and my God, all imparted through that. And I believe to the extent that each of us can go to that inner core, because see, in our center is our power. That's really where our power is. And begin to celebrate ourselves and really rest and begin to receive from others who want to help us. I believe that those are, for at least for me, for what I know to be true, that has been what's encouraged me this month, well over particularly the last 6 months in particular, but it was really, really intensified this month. And James Baldwin, he wrote in Fire Next Time, it was a letter to his 14-year-old nephew. He said he tells his nephew that his grandfather was ultimately undone, destroyed, in fact, he said, by believing that he was what white society said he was, subhuman. So he told his nephew that he must not make the same mistake as his grandfather by believing what white people say about him. And perhaps one of the keys to not being bitter about a lot of what's going on is to really begin to realize that what I say about me is more important, perhaps, than what anyone else says about me. Because we can never achieve our greatness if we don't believe that first and foremost about ourselves.
And so it's kind of, oh, was somebody saying something?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that what I am also sitting with is, it is fine to the idea of bullying. It is fine to have differences of opinion. Those are going to happen. But I think it's important for us to, number one, engage in learn to engage in those conversations without expecting closure, and back away from conversations where your perspective is being minimized or scoffed at, because that doesn't feel good either. And while folks may not put that into the category of bullying, I would say that folks who, through either sort of this terror campaign that you're kind of seeing on social media or in real life or in friend groups or those kinds of things, when it comes to the minimization of the values and positions that you hold dear, it's okay to fall back, right? You don't have to continue to argue why your position is right, why your, worth is high value, or sort of, whatever the argument is.
I've seen this whole thing on social. It's a meme on social media. I've seen it's to your point. Like, if you say 1 + 1 = 5, you're right. Like, you did. I know personally, I've gotten to a place where I won't engage anymore in fight. Like, I'm just too tired of. I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to prove our positions about anything. These are our lives that we live, and we don't need to prove to opposition or what was the term you used, Stephanie, when you talked about there was a term you used. It's escaping me for the moment, but the folks who like to come to battle, like no
Mhm.
one, what was the term you used? Because I was going to also respond because I want to mention somebody who's coming on with us next week. So it'll come back to me
The
because
campaign of terror?
yeah, the, the campaign of terror is that, yeah, that's the term. And so those attacks, like we're watching happen like I could literally do a show every week on attacks of Black women because I'm watching it unfold like every single week. But to your point, like learning to just kind of like, I just won't even engage in it anymore. I think many of us have just decided it's just too much. Like, we have to understand whose doggy do I hear? Somebody's doggy? Do you hear that? Maybe it's just coming through on my side. Anyhow, I didn't mean to belabor the point. Go ahead, Erin.
I did want to say something though. I had a student reach out to me this morning. I teach an online class, and I have a student who's in Minnesota, and he's a college student doing a degree on social justice. And he asked, is it best to fight radical people with radical messages? So if someone fights way over here, is it best to come back at them with this? And I said, I don't fight. I don't debate people. So if you want to get into a debate, we're done. Like I'm not in it for a debate anymore. And I learned this as a teacher. As soon as you get into a fight with a student, you've lost. As the adults in the room, you've lost the battle. And so I choose not to debate people. So if someone wants a debate, that's my exit ticket. Like I've got enough work to be done that I'm not debating my existence. I'm not debating my choices. I mean, you and I have run for office. So when people tell me who I need to vote for, I tell them, you don't get to tell me who I need to vote for. I get to choose. And guess what? I have run for statewide office. So I've invested more money than any of y'all who are critiquing me. Any of y'all who think I should vote a particular way, I have invested more money and time on my own in my own campaign for office. So you don't get to tell me. And I just don't even entertain. And as I see those hit pieces coming on TikTok, I'm seeing them all the time. Those, here's how we should all vote pieces, especially from white folks. I just don't even, I scroll right past. Like I
Right,
can tell in the
exactly.
first 2 seconds. But I think so. I was telling people in training today, I think we give way too much energy to things that don't deserve our energy. I only have so much energy. And so I'm going to be really intentional and explicit about who gets my energy, where I place that energy. And I refuse to let other people tell me what's valuable. And I am the author of my own story.
Exactly.
And I know what I need better than anybody else.
Exactly. Dr. J, were you thinking something there? I was watching.
I was as I was listening. I'm sorry I lost you all for a minute. I'm glad that I'm back. Thank you. I was thinking that this is I was reading a book entitled "The First Ladies" about the relationship between Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt. And Mary McLeod Bethune was pressing upon Eleanor Roosevelt the importance of her talking to her husband about an anti-lynching law in America. And of course, he didn't want to do this because he was thinking that was going to impede his ability to get his New Deal legislation across or passed. And Mary McLeod Bethune told Eleanor Roosevelt, well, if you don't do anything about it, then you are acquiescing to the racism. And that hit Roosevelt, according to this, as the story goes. And then they came together to figure out how to make a difference. And the reason why I bring that up is because I'm listening to Erin, and I think she probably springboard for something that Stefani said. It just reminds me of in the faith community, we say you can't praise God and be depressed at the same time. You can't praise God and be depressed at the same time. And it seems to me in this path forward, right, as long as we stay focused on what that path is, focused on our calling, focused on what is set before us to do, then all this other stuff gets to leave our core, gets to leave our essence, and we get to remove and release that trauma from our bodies as we intentionally go toward something as opposed to fighting against something.
I was going to say, I'm going to praise you until I believe every word I said. Right. And so, right. So it's, it's one thing to, be the candle in the church, but it's another thing to be a light in the world. Yeah, these attacks are something I invited just for a portion of our show next week to bring on. Do you all know Christiana Obey Summer, who's running for District 5 in Seattle? I invited her to come on for a few minutes next week, although I have intentionally not done a lot of candidates and so forth this go around for a variety of reasons, one of which is my own mental health of dealing with all these campaigns. And I personally don't feel like listening to narratives anymore. Like I want, authentic. I invited her because she's under attack. Have you caught that at all on social? So she's under attack. And what had happened was I saw these ads are being ran against her. And I saw the firm that's running the ads against her, which is Cerulean. Do you know who they are, Erin? Yeah, I do. I had actually hired them. And I would say several Black campaigns have used them. It's CN4. Have you heard of CN4? Yeah, it's that group. And the attack ads against her, that's a Democrat fundraising firm that's launched $100,000 against her. And I reached out to her because mainstream, they are able to spend $100,000 to launch an attack against a Black woman like that. And she's young, she's our children's age. And so I'm just going to offer a little bit of the platform so she can talk about what she's doing. And, she just got the stranger endorsement. And so I just in good conscience can't sit and watch another Black woman have a campaign or people launch against her because she stands for her causes, right? Her issues. And so it's exhausting to watch this happening. I also invited on, although I don't think either of them can make it, I invited on Judge Tracy Flood again, and I also invited Judge Mary Anderson. I don't think either of them can join next week, but they're under attack as well. And so here we've got these 3 Black women here. I know there's more, but, to all of your points that, we're just sitting here, on a Tuesday night watching TV, and all of a sudden you see this ad run across your TV, diminishing you and diminishing the choices that you've had to make in your life to be able to pay bills and the kind of things that she shared with me yesterday. I just can't sit quietly on the sidelines and allow that to happen. But it is happening, and it is to all of our points. Erin has 6 feet of space around her. I have 5 feet 2 inches around me that I can do what I can do. And then I have to separate from it too, because I myself can't take it anymore. It's just become too much. It's just become too much for any one person, I think, to sustain or to tolerate or to take in or respond to. It's just like, and so I start asking these questions around, how do we see or build bridges of hope between sectors of society that do not traditionally engage with each other for substantial change? Like, how do we do this now? Like, we play our part, but how do we build that bridge and get our sisters elsewhere who don't look like us to step in further and help? Like, do you have thoughts about that?
I'll just share, and this is such a small example, but, I host a gathering every Monday night for anyone interested in equity and education to just show up and be together. And we've been meeting every Monday since March 16th of 2020. It's like 3.5 years now. And it's not a big group, but it's a white woman who is in her late 70s, an Asian woman who's in her late 60s, several college students who are Black and biracial and Asian and queer and non-binary. We have a trans student that shows up from Texas every week, a dark-skinned Black trans man. We now have a Bengali and Iranian trans woman. But it's, I mean, talk about like people that don't belong together. But the whole opportunity is just to practice having dialogue with one another across difference. And what is so fascinating that happened on Monday, the Bengali student was talking, and this is a Bengali refugee who was forced to come to America because in Bangladesh, well, in India, where where she was living, they don't accept trans people, and this person is a Dalit, which is like the lowest of the low in the caste. It's the bottom of the barrel, often slaves. And this student was sharing online, and the white woman, who is in her late 70s, sent a message to everyone like, I am learning so much here. And I think it's such great modeling of how do we create spaces where people can just learn, where people can learn to be in community together with one another, even across difference. And what I would say is my tiny little community is a great example of what is possible if we allow it to be and if we create the circumstances for it to be. Now, the really crazy thing about this little community, we meet on New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve, Easter. Doesn't matter. If it's a Monday night, we are meeting. Labor Day, we meet because this is what they have come to depend on as their community. And I think we've got to create more spaces like that, where we are intentionally creating community and inviting people from really different backgrounds to just be in community together. Because we may only be 10 or 15 each week, but those 10 or 15 are reaching out to other people and telling other people, and they're learning things about each other and then sharing those things and learning things and sharing things. I think sometimes we want to do the really big thing, but it's sometimes the really little thing that makes, and I tell you, those people give me life. There are times where I'm on the road and Monday night comes and I got to find a coffee shop to sit in, kind of like tonight. But they give me life. I leave every Monday like, oh my gosh, I love that little community so much. And so I just would encourage people, especially those watching, like find a community that you can join, whether it's a knitting community or a reading community, like the normal things that you'd like to do. Find a community, get in it, and stay there. And just stay committed. I think we have lost that ability to congregate with one another. People are not going to church together anymore. They're not part of social groups anymore. We've lost the ability to know how to be together in community. And this online community for me has just been such an incredible gift.
Do the others of you, Dr. J and Dr. C, do you have communities that you belong to like that as well? I don't. And to Erin's point, I stopped going in the buildings, the church buildings during COVID, and I haven't re-entered. I don't want to say that space because I very much am in that space through my home, but I was one of the people who said I could not do remote church. Like I needed to be in the buildings, and now I don't go to the buildings. But this group is part of my community. You know, do you all have these communities out too that you are a part of that help breathe that life into you as well?
Stephanie,
Yeah.
looks like you wanted to say something. I'll speak after you.
Yes. I wanted to go back though and add something to what Erin said. I absolutely think these communities are important. I also want to say that sometimes I feel like we as Black women have lost confidence in our own epistemologies, our own ways of knowing. And we're going to be all right, right? We always have been all right, even in the worst of times. And I say that to say that I feel like as Black women are expected to save all the people. And we've talked about this before. We're the cleaners. Like when people have tore it up, typically who don't look like us, typically we get our chances to be in leadership spaces or take the lead of, the volunteer organization or the school board when something catastrophic has happened and it needs to be cleaned up. And even if it took 7 years for it to be tore up, you get 362 days to fix it. And we have stepped into that. We have accepted it. That was too many syllables. We have accepted it. And and a lot of times we do the damn thing, right? I want to offer us the invitation to lay that down, right? And to hand off that part of this being in community and part of the way that this is going to improve is laying down that superwoman trope. Like it's not doing well, it's not doing good for our mental health, our physical health. There's a whole thing called weathering. We weather so bad that sometimes some of these medical research projects, they screen us out because we skew the results. That's how bad Black women's health outcomes are. And I think just somewhere along the way, we have lost touch with our own ways of knowing. Like we make a way out of no way. Uh, for us, our families, in community, sort of all of those things. But we cannot. There's a running joke. Who is the early warning system? Black women. We've got to stop being the early warning system.
Ooh.
We've got to stop doing that and hand some of this, all of this, a lot of this responsibility to folks who say that they want to see something different and that they're in this struggle with us, in this fight with us. Okay, well, here's some of the thing. Go. As opposed to the cycle of every 2, 4, 6 years. Oh, we should have listened to Black women. We should have listened to Black women, sort of thing. So I just want to offer that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I spent this morning, I was getting dressed to go to another birthday lunch and noticed that there is a whole bunch more of me to love than there was a few months ago. And this was very shocking to me because yesterday was the first day I went grocery shopping in 5 months because the neighbors have taken care of me. They fed me. They hugged me. They told me they loved me. They poured into me all summer when I could barely just get up and go outside and sit in the sun. And then in Rochester, New York, there's a whole community of family, not by blood, but because they were there 5 years ago when I needed someplace to stay when Dad passed. And they have continued to give me the pre-COVID discount rate when I stay there for weeks on end, feed me, love me, and ask me, when am I moving to New York State? And I say that because it's a whole, and yes, I still do have communities like Erin that I've stepped out of, speaking to Stephanie's point, but I would submit that until we can relate and talk with the person who's sitting across us and be more concerned about that than 5,000 likes on some social media platform with people who don't know anything about us or care anything about us, I think that's where the change is intentionally. Dr. King did not say, I have a set of objectives. He didn't even say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream. And that's what he talked about, no matter what they did about it to him or said about him. And people from across the world came without an internet, a tweet, Instagram, no social messaging, in the heat of the summer, August, in Washington, D.C. Why? Because they saw themselves in that dream, and it resonated human rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jobs and freedom, right? That resonated with all kinds of people that they came together. And I believe that when we choose to lift up our voice and
Mm-hmm.
speak, that whatever we say, when it resonates with others, they will come. Because quite truthfully, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not interested in convincing anyone of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Not right now. Right now, it's time to go with the goers,
Mm-hmm.
because destiny demands that we move forward.
Mm-hmm. That's a powerful statement, Dr. J. You know, I'm not interested in making people do or believe or, you know, take care of. I think that's, and one of you made a comment earlier to the same effect about, like, we're in a space right now where it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, it's not my business what your opinion is, right? Like, um, we deserve to show up as who we are, and be who we are, and be able to rest as well and have communities around us that support us and that make us, the word I'm going to use is safe, right? Do I feel safe talking to this person about A, B, and C? If I don't, what am I going to do about that, right? How do you discern all of that? Like, that has become increasingly important for us for our ability to move forward, is that we preserve ourselves and learn to receive the gifts that are being given to us. I certainly have received a lot as of late gifts. Um, and so, and actually, it was you, Dr. J, that said, learn to receive. Like, you're so used to giving, learn to let other people take care of you for a change. Learn to let somebody look out for you for a change. Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, in line with that, you know, I just flew home from DC on Saturday night, and you get on a plane and they talk about, you know, put the mask on yourself first before you put it
Mhm,
on. To Stephanie's point earlier, as women, and then especially as Black women, we have been trained to put the mask on everybody else first.
mhm,
Like, we don't even get a mask for ourselves. By the way,
mhm,
if you take the mask for yourself, you're being selfish.
See,
But the
mhm,
reality is, no, we've got to put the mask. And it's part of the reason I run right now. Somebody asked me, you know, I had to speak in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho 2 weeks ago. And I don't know if I shared the story on here, but I had to stay in Hayden Lake, Idaho 2 weeks ago. Hayden Lake, Idaho. I had to stay there. And that's a
I,
whole story in itself.
I
But
think you were on air that night with us, weren't you?
I may have been. I may
Yeah.
have been. Anyway, but one of the things I shared with people is, because I know that my work is so hard. Like, I am in these spaces that you can feel the tension in the room. You can
Mhm,
feel people are here who don't want to be here. They don't really want to hear the message. I know that I have to be physically and mentally fit. And so
mhm,
I tell folks, part of the reason I run every day, the older I get, the more I have to be physically fit. So the more I am
mhm,
committed to getting out and running every day, to going and lifting a few times a week, because I need to feel strong too. But also resting and taking my naps. Like, I will take a nap in a heartbeat. I have no shame in it at all. I used to think it was selfish. Now I'm like, no, this is what I need to put my mask on every
mhm,
day. Is I've got to take naps. I got to start with meditation every day. Like, I have these practices that are just like non-negotiables for me wherever I am, that I do to put that mask on me first. And so, you know, especially to us women and Black women in particular, we have been sold a bill of goods that we got to put the mask on everybody else first, that we don't deserve it for ourselves. Man, we better have a golden mask for us, like a
mhm,
super big golden mask for us. So because we're being demanded so much of, that we have to first. So I tell people, spirit, mind, body. Every day I do something for spirit, mind, body, and I really pour into myself. And I see that as an investment in me, but also that gives me the ability to pour back out into other people.
mhm. I am personally debilitated from doing that at the moment, which has really impacted my life in a substantial way. To your point, Erin, when you're used to having that kind of an outlet for yourself, like, this is literally the first fall in 50 something years that I haven't been in the trails every day. I love this season. I love the I love this season, and I haven't personally been able to enjoy it that way. And so my grasp my trees and my trails is faith. I mean, it's literally the only thing I feel at this moment that can hear, can hear me cry at night when my pain, it's pretty intense. It's intense season for me right now. And I
Mhm.
think for a lot of us to be able to um, um, our paths forward, right? The ability to trust and the ability to heal and the ability to be in circles of other women that are not going to harm each other, right? Let's talk
Mhm.
about that for a second because there are not a lot of, at least from my perspective, of tight circles of women. And I don't mean that you can say it as Black women. Certainly, we can broaden that and talk about the interracial ones or the internationalities, what you were talking about a few minutes ago, Erin, because Karen Fleshman's actually doing something similar to that. I think you probably know that. Dr. J and Dr. C, do you know who Karen Fleshman is?
I
Out of
don't.
San Francisco. Okay, she's a white woman out of San Francisco who is working very hard to build those bridges as well. In fact, she reached out this past week and I wrote a white paper on the issues surrounding what she's asking. I'm being a little comical, but this whole notion of our own having our own circles of trust where we can lay ourselves down and not be judged or criticized or attacked or what Dr. C used around the fighters or the people who want to come tear us down, even in circles that um I think we have believed. Let me say that different because I don't want it to come across that I'm directing it at anyone because I'm not. But we've all, to my knowledge, I think, have all been around people who have betrayed us in our circles in the past. And so the ability to have trust going forward is very difficult because it stays right below the surface of, oh, is that going to happen again? And so that is I don't know, a rhetorical kind of problem to solve for us collectively as women. How do we solve for that? How do we solve for that whole need to be in safe spaces? What are your thoughts about that?
So this is very fascinating that you bring this up. I don't know how much time we have left. I don't see my clock here. But I'm reminded of a Sankofa. Going back to Dad's house was a Sankofa moment for me. It's an African term. Sometimes you have
Mhm,
to go back, gather things from the past to move forward. And what you're talking about, Cindy, is by design. In the Willie Lynch pattern of the making of a slave, dividing women
mhm,
was part of it, for which the generational trauma takes place. And I see this as an opportunity for generational healing and generational blessing. And I hate to say, I know, Stephanie, you didn't say just say no, but those words are coming to mind. You see, there comes a point where the hemorrhaging and the bleeding must stop, or we will be stopped. I was at a restaurant,
mhm,
someone said something to me, thanked me for my former role, and I started crying and wound up in a fetal position on the bench.
mhm,
Obviously something happened, and if indeed the pattern was to divide us, to create jealousy, envy, or mistrust, then
mhm,
perhaps the solution moving forward is affirmation and loving and forgiving and getting that bitterness out, back to getting the
mhm,
bitterness out of us
mhm,
by loving. It comes from Matthew 5:44. Love our enemies, bless those who hate us or curse us, really. Do good to
mhm,
those who hate us, and pray for those who despitefully use and persecute us. And
mhm,
oftentimes it's hard to do that or forgive, but fundamentally, all of that, as Stephanie said months ago,
mhm,
that stuff lives in our
mhm,
body. It has
mhm,
to go somewhere.
mhm.
So
And
I
how it
see,
shows
I
how
see
it
us
yeah,
resting, affirming, and intentionally taking care of ourselves. We get to
yeah.
start the generational healing
Mhm.
moving forward.
In our last minute or two here, you're not going to believe who just joined us.
You know what? Because he is faithful.
Dang.
He is faithful. I will not be locked out. I will not be stopped. The internet will not throw me a curveball.
You pretty much summarizing what we just talked about tonight.
I'm trying to look at different formats. Okay, there's one. I was trying to look at some different formats to make it look good. Well, Michele, welcome to the last minute or two of the show here. We were just kind of, we were just answering the question, or Dr. J was elaborating on, we were talking about inner circles of women's healing and what are the things that we need to do to, I think the words you were just using, Dr. J, was kind of address the root of the anger or hurt or bitterness or all the things that we all have. So there's no, let's not dance around that. Like, we've all been harmed so much that isn't there a level of that in most people that, talk about the trees of life from Dr. Anita Phillips, right? I know, do you want to answer that, Michele, or Dr. J? Do you want to comment on that a little more? We have a couple minutes.
Yeah. I'll say this. What I have learned, and we've talked about this a lot, Cindi, how the gut, your gut biomes are.
Did she just freeze again? She's
That a lot of that
you just
resent
froze.
foster. They trade places in between the two, and there is this connectedness. And talking about, like, when we pray, when you feel those feelings, like holding your stomach, just that act of holding your stomach and praying, right? There's just something that happens, because what it does is it puts you in touch with that unhealed child. That unhealed child. And that's who we all are in God's eyes, right? And because he sets a place, and that's what I was saying when, the confluence of events that I thought I had beat the devil, because I had gone to my daughter's place, and then that's where I was going to be. So I wasn't going to have these issues. And so I beat the devil, and then he found a way to find me there. And I said, no, you know what? I was born God's child. So anything you throw at me, God he has reserved me for him. I am God's child, and he is faithful.
Right.
So he will make a way. All I have to do is believe. And how much belief do I have to have? That amount of belief that's in a mustard seed. But that's all that it takes to fester, right? Fester and grow in us as humans. And that's what we have to work through, because it will grow and grow and grow to these proportions. I heard someone say at this offsite meeting I went to today, think about the pandemic. Everything we knew about the pandemic, at first, the people that said, hey, this is a big thing, sounded like heresy, like we were talking crazy talk. What we learned as we got into it, it wasn't even enough. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Everything we warned about going into January 6th sounded like henny penny the sky was falling. Turned out it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough.
Have any of the rest, I know Dr. J and Michele have seen the sermon by Dr. Anita Phillips. Erin, and Stefani, have you seen, what was the name of the sermon again?
Of the decision tree.
The decision tree. You must watch it. Like, there's just no other way, because she talks about, she's a preacher, but she preaches about, she's about the heart and about the 4 valves that come from the heart, and where it, like, there's so much power to it. Dr. J sent it to me, and I sent it to Michele, and Michele and I were pretty much crying on the phone to each other watching it, because it resonates. Every woman, every person who's watching this needs to see that sermon by Dr. Anita Phillips. It's so powerful, and it's healing to listen to it and to experience it with her. Do either of you want to add some more commentary to that? Because I found it to be one of the most incredible sermons I've ever listened to.
Well, and for the sake of time, I just want to add, and it really amplifies what Erin was talking about on the importance of spirit, soul, and body, and what Stefani was talking about on the importance of pretty much protecting our heart and saying no to things that are not healthy for us.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Well, we are out of time for the evening. I mean, the 5 of us could talk forever about these topics, and we will talk forever about all of these topics. Queens, thank you for coming on tonight and having this conversation. Like, we have to continue. First off, we have to continue to role model ourselves as Black women who collectively come together and talk about these issues, and help be the light in the world and not just the candle in the church. And so thank you all for joining me again tonight. To our audience who joined us this evening, I just want to thank you for coming on and listening every week with us as we unpack a lot of these different issues that are impacting us as Black women. As I mentioned earlier, for a brief part of our show next week, we will have a candidate, Christiana Obey Summer, who is under attack in her race for Seattle City Council District 5, I believe. So we're going to get to hear from her. And then we will have the Queens on with us again next week. So thank you all for joining. Have a good week. We will see you next Wednesday.
Half that up in sacks, I favor Black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody.